and then it changes the way that...
Well, the thing is, no, but you'd think it'd be wonderful, but it's quite awful for them.
But I wonder if this is a way for us to understand you a bit more, Douglas Coupland, because this is something that is firing your imagination. Yeah. And we see it running through this book from page 20 to page 150, the visions of this character.
Yeah.
And I think you're telling us it's true, that of course this fascination for you has bled through into this book, and we understand more about its author as a result.
Well, they've done experiments on the human brain using magnetic resonance imaging, and they've shown that it was juggling. People who've never juggled before, they gave them 3 bean bags, and they said, okay, study juggling intensively, and 30 days later they came back, and a whole new part of their brain had turned like orange and red, because it deals with space and volumes, and we're built to see things in 3 dimensions. I can't sleep at night if I think about shapes or objects. It just keeps me awake. I can only fall asleep at night if I read someone else's fiction or a story or a narrative. Like, even if it's a small one, I still need that, and then I can fall asleep. So there's definitely parts of the brain involved.
And to answer my question, there's definitely a large part of you in that character. His vision, or at least your obsession with images and visions, is seen in this book. But let me ask you something else that I think we can read into what's happened to you.
Okay.
Is your productivity. Since Generation X came out in '91, you've written, is it 9 fiction and 3 non-fiction? It's roughly a book a year, I think, if I work it out.
Oh dear. Yes.
So, are you what you do? Because your characters often rest with that question. They drop out, they flake out, they move away from jobs, they take Mac jobs. You coined that phrase. Are you what you do? If you didn't write, would you be balmy?
Probably. I don't think of myself as productive. I think of myself, honestly, as lazy as dirt. I made this decision long ago because I knew I would never be able to wake up in the morning, because I have a big problem with sleep, that I would never wake up unless I felt like waking up. But otherwise...
You'd never wake up unless you felt like waking up?
Yeah, I just...
You mean get up?
There's something about getting up on someone else's schedule that just can't deal with.
But you can't control when you wake up. You mean you'd never get out of bed if you didn't want to?
Well, no, for example, this morning was great. I sort of woke up and lie around for a bit more, and then I sort of got out organically, as opposed to having an alarm clock ring and going like that. What I think makes me different from a lot of people is that if I have an idea, A, I never talk myself out of exploring it, and B, I go very quickly into implementation.
In other words, writing.
Yeah, and writing visual things too.
And you no longer take notes. You used to, but now you write straight from your head.
You know how that happened? I used to take notes all the time, and then I would notice that when things were written about in papers or people quoted things, it was always just the stuff I made up on the fly. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm just going to make things up on the fly now, hence the name fiction. And I just make it all up now.
One reviewer hinted, he liked Eleanor Rigby, but he said that the timeline was complicated, and that if you think of some of your first work, including Generation X, it's a straight line, whereas Eleanor Rigby, it's like a movie, flips you backwards and forwards. It's not, I mean, you can understand it, but it's got a timeline which in a way feels like a movie. In the same way that you're influenced by images, are you influenced by movies now? Are you writing almost a screenplay in this latest novel?
Well, considering not one of my books has ever been made into a movie, I don't think so. I think movies are a different beast altogether. And what I am finding myself interested now is theater. That is where I can see that's my new big direction. Theater people are wonderful. You call them lovies, I think, in England. But they're fantastic. Yes, they're very generous. They're always punctual, which I really like. And there's something about being in a room and everyone's talking about, well, what's the emotion being expressed here? Is it real? And how can we amplify that, or should we pull back? And I like that.
And dialogue is a large part of your novels. It's always there. It would be easy to see how it could translate. Away from some of these issues about your work, and in the short time that's left us, I want to just ask you about being a Canadian, because I wonder if it's a blessing or a curse to be said that Canadians are good observers of the US, that they're the David next to the Goliath. And with that in mind, you've spent so much time writing characters in the US. What's your view of the pull of US pop culture and culture at the moment, despite what's going on, and because of what's going on in the world politically? Is it your sense that US culture is still a strong pull around the world, and in Canada, for instance?
I actually stopped selling my books in the States in the mid-90s. And that was actually more than anything, again, out of laziness. It's just easier to put things where you live, which is Vancouver, BC for me. What's happened is, in the same way that like the Basque region or the splintered remains of the Soviet Republic, everyone's discovered their sense of themselves. Canada, after 130-something years, is starting to define itself in terms of itself, not as a reaction to U.S. culture. And in Vancouver, you live 2 hours from the U.S. border. It's always there. But I think the diplomatic way of saying it is that we're becoming more Canadian and they're becoming more American.
What in that case, what fascinates you most about the Americans right now?
How are they going to hold together? There's just, honestly, it's like you've got two nations. It's not the North and the South. It's whatever and whatever. And they've stopped agreeing to agree. It's either you believe everything I say or that's it. And they lost that friendly dialogue. The States was always a very friendly place to go. People always seemed to really like each other, and now they've stopped liking each other, and that's sort of sad.
Do you mean that right now, or do you mean it in the last 5 years? Because you embarked on this big tour of the U.S. about the time of September 11, I believe you were.
Oh, the first city was in Madison, Wisconsin.
So, but you said we were traveling America, and you found a lot of respect for yourself and a lot of talking with people. So do you mean it's a more recent?
It's among themselves. It's not with me per se.
Right.
I have a lot of wonderful American friends, but because we get all their news stations and all their talk stations, and they've stopped being a civil society. They're just angry at each other. Not even the outer world, just themselves.
And do you suspect that sort of comment coming from you, a world-selling global author, makes you unpopular in the U.S. now that you speak in those sort of terms?
Oh no, I think anyone who's American listening to this, what's it feel like right now? I think it's a very painful time. I love Americans. Tons of my friends are American. I do a lot of work there, but I think they're going through a rough patch. And that's not a value, it's just they're going through a rough patch right now.
But your characters were going through a rough patch in '91 in Palm Springs, California, weren't they? They were kind of confused with their consumer society and their role in it.
Yeah. That was 12 years.
12 years ago. So you were banging on the Americans' case 12 years ago.
Oh, well. There was Microserves, which is a book I wrote in 93, 94, came out in 95. That was also about American culture from a different direction. That was before Microsoft was big, and that was before people knew what an IPO was or a startup or anything about. And I remember my publishers were saying, "Well, Microsoft, what's that? And why would anyone care? And what's all this about?" And it's not as if I go out there with some big Geiger counter trying to find the latest hip or cool thing. I just write about what I'm fascinated about, and that tends to be, these things that just happen.
If I can end by taking it back to where we began, which is your sort of slightly awkward feelings about talking about what you do. You told The Observer in the year 2003, there's a tendency in me that wants at any moment to vanish. So will there come a time when you sort of retreat to a cabin and let your books speak for themselves?
Next month. I think it happens to everyone as they get older, and I'd love to vanish. I would just love it so much, and it may well happen. Books, they take on a life of your own after you write them. They're you, but they're not you anymore, and you can't control what happens with them. And I wish them well and say hello from a distance of the years, but they're not my responsibility anymore. I've got new ones cooking. I'd rather do that.
Douglas Coupland, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.